Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reedy with Future Pastimes. I'm the designer of Cosmic Odyssey, which is the 7th expansion for Cosmic Encounter. It's a campaign expansion. It's also an expansion that expands on most of the variants that Fantasy Flight published before Odyssey. And it also introduced new variants, one of which was something called Lux. Now, Lux actually started off as something called Lucre that Eon introduced to Cosmic Encounter when they were publishing it way back. I thought it would be fun to do a video that talks about the road from Lucre to Lux, how it changed and why it ended up the way that it did. So go back to 1981, Eon is publishing Cosmic Encounter, and they are now putting out their 6th of what ended up being 9 expansions. Expansion 6 introduces Lucre. It also comes with some Lucre aliens, which you can only use if you're using the Lucre variant. And it comes with a sheet of Lucre counters. And you can use Lucre without the Lucre aliens, and I think most of the time players did because the Lucre aliens were hit and miss. Some of them were pretty good, some of them were okay. And I think that Lucre without the Lucre aliens was generally more interesting. So the way that those worked, it had a sheet of these little counters, and that's the symbol for Lucre, which I always kind of liked the symbol. These are very thin counters. I don't know that it even counts as cardboard, but the way that Lucre worked was everyone started off with 4 Lucre, and at the start of each of your encounters as the offense, you would get 1 Lucre from the bank. Now, you could spend Lucre to get your ships out of the warp, 1 Lucre per ship, and you could spend Lucre to buy cards from the deck, up to 4 cards, 1 Lucre per card. Additionally, the Lucre was kept on your star disc, so they had these cardboard discs that showed your player color, and they were also used for Destiny, but the one that was on your hex for your system was called your star disc, and you would put your Lucre there. Lucre on your star disc added to your total as the defense without being spent. So a fairly simple system, pretty decent. We liked Lucre quite a bit when we were playing it, although we did not use it all the time, probably not even half the time, but it was an interesting thing. I did love the idea of an economy into Cosmic Encounter. That's what first really opened up my mind to the fact that Cosmic Encounter could really include a lot of other elements and mechanisms, and that it was just a strong foundation to build upon, which I went crazy with. And I'm not alone, so a lot of other people figured that out as well and came up with a lot of other ideas, and certainly many of them have shown up in the Fantasy Flight edition. There are a lot of variants, as you will clearly be able to tell by going through the contents of Cosmic Odyssey. It was a pretty good idea, but a lot of people didn't like Lucre at all. They thought it was fiddly. They didn't like the fact that the Lucre on your star disc was adding to the defense and you didn't spend it, and that led to longer games because the defense would get stronger and they could just stockpile that Lucre. We usually didn't have a lot stockpiled just because we loved spending it mostly on cards. So that was the deal, but I think a lot of the people in the Mayfair edition involved with that and their play testers or their play team didn't love Lucre because they changed it quite a bit when they came out with their big expansion for Cosmic Encounter. So that was 1992 that they put out something called More Cosmic Encounter. It had a lot of new aliens, it added moons, and it added Lucre. Now the card stock for that was thicker. It's a proper token. It's still yellow. They did not use the same Lucre symbol, as you can see. They went with this crazy Laverne and Shirley L that was fine, but they also had different denominations, so you could say, oh, that's a 2, and this one is a 10 Lucre, so that you could make change and do that. So that was an improvement, certainly better tokens. I thought the symbol was better, and I'll get to that here in a second. But they had quite a few changes to how the Lucre was earned and how it was spent. So everyone started the game not with the same amount of lucre. You had 3 lucre plus your starting position. So if you were going to be going first, you would get 1 extra lucre. So you would start with 4 lucre. The next player in turn order would have 5, then 6, and 7, etc. And the reason that you were starting with less was because you were going to be earning. You earned at the start of your turn, and the amount of lucre that you earned was a little bit absurd. You would get 3 lucre plus 1 for each of your home planets that you occupied, including moons. And remember, moons were separate entities in your system, and you didn't start off occupying them. So in the very first turn, you were going to be earning 8 lucre as the offense because nobody was in your system. You had all 5 of your planets plus the 3. So you were going to be starting with quite a lot of lucre as that first player. And then as the game went on, if you had another turn, presumably you'd have fewer home planets that you were occupying. You might control one of your moons, so it would fluctuate a little bit. What you could spend it on varied, and it depended on the sequence of phases in a turn. So early on, or right around the regroup, you could spend 3 lucre to get another one of your ships out of the war. And there was no limit there. You could say, oh, I've got 12 lucre, I'm going to spend it all of them, get 4 ships out. When you got time to play your encounter cards, and they were called challenge cards then, but you were playing your encounter card, you could spend 3 lucre to add 1 to your side as a main player, not knowing what the totals are yet. Once those cards were revealed, you could spend 6 lucre to add a point. So you could get more for less without knowing that you needed it, which is an interesting concept, and I did enjoy that. Up to a certain point, you could spend 4 lucre to buy cards, but there was no upper limit to that. You could spend 10 lucre to discard a card from your hand, and you could spend 7 lucre to buy a flare from the unused flare deck. And flares in the Mayfair edition, just as a reminder, were one shot just like artifacts. They're very much like artifacts, but what was different was if you had the flare that matched your alien, you used the super effect, and if you didn't, you used the wild, and that was it. It could only be stopped by a flare zap is the other funny element. So when we were playing the Mayfair edition, we picked up more cosmic. We used moons almost all the time. And again, we were using lucre probably about 20 to 30% of the time. We still liked it, just not enough to want to use it all the time, which I think is fine. I think you don't necessarily have to have a variant that you're using all the time. We use the reward deck almost all the time. But now with the Fantasy Flight Edition, there are so many variants. You have technology and you have space stations, whatever. It's not meant to have all of them in all of the time. That's crazy. Just once in a while you might do that, but you want to mix it up. And I love using the age cards from Cosmic Odyssey is just a way to say, what are we going to have in this game? So it irrespective of whether we're doing a campaign, we like to just draw that to say, hey, here's how we're going to select our aliens. Here's a variant that we're going to use. It's a great way to mix things up and keep things fresh and surprising, and nobody has to think about or debate about what it is that we're going to use. Still, a lot of people were not in love with Lucre even in this one. They hated the idea of you have this whole chart that's different phases, and you're like, I don't know if we can do that. Some people loved it, and they added more and more things. They're like, we've added 5 other things that you can spend lucre on. So there was definitely an audience for that sort of element to Cosmic Encounter. And again, as a variant that you're using periodically, you want it to be something that is fun and innovative and adds some surprises or some emergency escapes or Hail Marys. There's a lot of interesting gameplay that is brought into it. But as players ranked all the variants over the years, leading up to and including when Fantasy Flight began to publish Cosmic Encounter, Lucre almost without exception ranked at the bottom. It was just not anybody's favorite variant, and that's not true. I know some people who it is their favorite variant, but not large numbers of people. So I think that Kevin Wilson, when he was shepherding Cosmic Encounter while he worked at Fantasy Flight, was like, there's no rush to ever do Lucre. And he and I had conversations about it, and I said, look, there were all these homebrew ideas for how to do technology, and your take on it I thought was good. And I think Fantasy Flight has done takes on other things, reimagining and improving. So I said, look, it's my challenge to you. I know that you can come up with a better way to do Lucre, but I think still in the back of his head, and certainly for like Peter Alaka and other members of Future Pastimes, they felt like Lucre became a taboo word to even say, hey, we're doing Lucre. People are going to just immediately be like, no thanks, why bother? So it was a mixed bag, but I was determined, because I'm a completionist when it comes to Cosmic Encounter. I want everything that's been in there back in. It can be changed and hopefully improved, but I do want it in there. And we did that with moons, and I'll do a separate video where we talk about the history of moons. But with Lucre, I was not alone. So when we were doing Cosmic Dominion, which is the 5th expansion, and it was the fan expansion, myself and Jefferson Crow and Bill Martinson were put in charge of the designers of that expansion. In many ways, we were shepherding. We were curating what was going to be in there. But we talked about, would this be an opportunity to try to include Lucre in some form? And I think, again, Peter Alaka was the one who said, let's just focus on the fan stuff. And I think Jefferson also was like, look, there are some old Eon aliens in here, and fans did vote on which ones they wanted to see published next. So they were going to be included in Dominion. But Lucre itself is not really a fan design thing. So we wanted to include some new fan element. We got the ship counters for that. As well as a new reward deck, and then all these fan-designed aliens. But in that process, Peter and Bill Eberly had said that they'd already been in talks with Fantasy Flight about doing another expansion. And that came out of the fact that as Dominion was first coming together, before it was officially a fan-designed alien, Peter and Bill had been working on a lot of new aliens and had been energized by the process, and they were going to include a lot of their new aliens with the fan expansion when it did become a fan designed expansion. But then they decided, you know what, let's let the fans do this, and Fantasy Flight has agreed to let us do our own expansion, which ultimately became Eons. So in those discussions about how there was going to be Cosmic Eons, we revisited the idea of Lucre. The other thing that happened was, after Dominion came out, Fantasy Flight put on a Cosmic Encounter themed event at their event center. It was a weekend of Cosmic Encounter called Cosmic Con, and there was a lot of interesting stuff that went on there. But after hours, we had a tournament, and we had special guests, and we had showcases, and Tom Vassell was there interviewing people. So it was very exciting for Cosmic nerds. But after hours, a lot of the designers were there basically by themselves in the event center, just shooting the breeze, talking about stuff, speculating about what might be in a future expansion, what we wanted to see. We talked about reverse hexes and moons. We talked about Lucre, and we, as a group, kind of came up with some interesting ideas. And I showed off all of my other takes on it. I had a Lucre reward deck, which gave you ways to earn and spend Lucre. We talked about the idea of the asteroid system that I have, where that was its own take on Lucre, which I thought was a really interesting take. But at some point in the conversation, we talked about the way that you earned Lucre has always been controversial. So like that idea in the Mayfair, where I'm starting with 4 and then I'm immediately going to earn 8. So I've got a lot more than anybody else by virtue of going first. And so Peter Alaka came up with this idea that captured everybody's imagination, and it involved the hyperspace gate. So he thought, what would be interesting is, You point the hyperspace gate, and then you're launching your ships, and you're launching 1 to 4 ships. That's the normal rule. He said, what if for each ship that you didn't launch, you put a Lucre there, and that is how you're earning it, and you're determining how much you earn by how much you are risking or committing to that encounter. So if you're bringing a lot of ships, you're not going to get a lot of Lucre. If you're just sending the one, you're going to get 3 Lucre. And we thought that's great, but it's still in the hands of the offense, and we wanted to find ways for the other players to get that as well. And so one of the things that I contributed was, well, let's say that there's going to be 4 Lucre. The offense is going to control how much they get and how much they don't get, meaning somebody else is going to get it. So the idea is there's going to be 4 Lucre. If the offense launches 1 ship, they're going to get 3 of it. It's going to go here on the hyperspace gate, which they'll get at the end of the encounter. But that 4th one is actually being pushed into the system, and whoever's system it is going to be the one who claims that Lucre. So if you come at them with 4 ships, you're going to give them 4 Lucre, which they can't use it right away. They'll get it at the end of the encounter, win or lose. And so that idea stuck for a long time, because it was quite a few years before Lucre could really find its way into being published. So Cosmic Dominion happened. Cosmic Eons was going on, but Bill and Jefferson and I were not involved in that. It was back to Future Pastimes. It was Peter and Bill and Greg Alaka working on that, and they finished it. They turned it in, and Fantasy Flight said, "No, there's a lot of weird stuff going on. We don't even understand it. Try again." And so they did, and they turned it in, and Fantasy Flight still said no. And so I'm not sure whose great idea it was, but somebody said, get those 3 guys from Cosmic Dominion, and maybe they can help whip this into shape. And it was probably Peter and Bill. So Bill and Jefferson and I were brought back in. We were shown all of the aliens. We worked with them on finding ways to make them more accessible, more Fantasy Flight friendly, but still retain a lot of what it is that they were trying to do with these really unusual and in many ways innovative takes on new alien effects. A lot of them, it required a lot of tiny text on those sheets, but I think we still managed to get them to the point where they could be published. But the 3 of us said, every expansion has had new aliens, but has also added some variant, and you need to have a variant in here. So we played around with Lucre. But one of the first things that Peter said was, you've got to change the name. We don't want to call it Lucre. We got to come up with something else. So Bill Martin came up with the idea of Lux, as I had been describing the Lucre as these fragments of stars that the hyperspace gate is either scooping up or pushing into the system. And he's like, well, Lux means light, and that's what stars are. So we all thought Lux was a great idea, and so Lux was born. So we started with the hyperspace gate idea. And then we were just like, all right, what are you spending it on? How is it working? And we decided that the most elegant solution was you're using it and you're spending it on rewards. We were all very much loving the 2 reward decks that we had, and we wanted to find more ways to get access to those cards. Bill loved the cards, and he loved Lux because he's like, it just lets us get those cards. And it lets you get your ships out too. So that it's an established concept, reward. You're getting cards from the deck or the reward deck if in play, and ships out of the warp. So you don't need necessarily a chart that breaks all that down. It's something, it's parlance that Cosmic Encounter fans understand. So that seemed like a good way to do it. But limiting it just to that, something was missing. It wasn't quite. We were like, this seems really good, but there's something about it. Not everybody was satisfied. We wanted to find other ways to take advantage of the Lux and use it. Some of the innovative stuff. Some of the stuff from the Mayfair chart, a lot of people liked that. They liked the idea of, I can buy a flare, or I can discard a card. But how do we accomplish that without having to? Everyone's got this intricate, long laundry list of effects and when you can do it. And so at the 11th hour, we just said the time is not right for Lux, and it got pulled out, and Bill came in with the Alliance dials as something so that we could still have another variant in there, and that was a miracle of expediency. And I'm really happy with it turned out. I wish they were a little bit bigger, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks that, but it's a great idea. It's a really interesting take on it, and I was happy that we were able to add the foreign aid as another little tweak in there just to give it something extra special. So that was how that came about. And then once it got shipped off to Fantasy Flight, the next week, I hit upon an idea that I thought would actually have worked. We didn't have time to play test it. The ship was out of the barn at that point, so there was no going back, but I kept it in the back of my head. And when I joined Future Pastimes in 2019, I began to work on another Cosmic Encounter expansion, even though we didn't have a contract for one. But at some point, Fantasy Flight was at escape velocity with us, and they said, look, we're going to do a renewal on the license to keep publishing Cosmic Encounter. It's still a pretty good product for Fantasy Flight. It keeps selling. And so we said, well, we want to work into the contract another expansion. So they agreed to that. And then some time went by. And then we had a meeting. We said, hey, we want to do an expansion. But before that meeting happened, I'd actually created a roadmap for 3 more expansions. My objective was Eon did 9 expansions for Cosmic Encounter. Fantasy Flight needs to do at least 9 expansions. So we'd had 6 up to that point with Eons. So I had a Lux and Moons expansion. That was going to be number 7. Number 8 was going to be one that did the expansion of all the expansions. And 9 was going to be something that addressed reverse hexes, the one element that is still not in our Fantasy Flight edition that I hope one day we can get in there. And Fantasy Flight said, well, we can do another small block expansion, or we could do something more aggressive and crazy. So they said, throw every idea you have at the wall. And that was how we said, look, not necessarily a legacy game, although we said, what about Cosmic Legacy? And they loved the idea, but the practicality of stickers and boxes and stuff like that was just like that. That's not really our vibe. And then I said, well, I countered with, what if we could do a campaign that has a lot of those elements that you see often in a legacy type game, but without the really, really legacy stuff. So, and that's how Cosmic Odyssey was born. Just as a little show and tell, first of all, I had made my own Lucre counter. So as you can see, it uses the symbol, but it also has the number. I also was using like a colored border so that at a glance you could tell, all right, so the greens are 5s, purple for 2. I even had a 20 Lucre with a red border. The Fantasy Flight edition, they went with a punch board. And it was a design that I did. So I was like, here's what the Lux will look like. And then we have a thing called Ultra Lux, which there were 3, and they can have special characteristics. I wanted to get these crystal tokens. I was like, I love the tactile feel of these. And then I've got, my Ultra Lux as well. They're like, there's plenty going on in this box, Jack. So cool it with adding in more bling and unnecessary expense. So fair enough. And, I'm not the only one who gets extra stuff for their game. So I think a lot of other people will do this. So where did we end with Lux? Well, the final design of Lux was cards that had something going on each side. On one side, it was the Lux market, and it's the what you might call the basic approach to Lux, which you can play. You can just say, we're just going to use this basic approach. And the way that works is the offense sets the market rate. So they say how much it's going to cost to get rewards. So it's just, again, it's still rewards. It's that same concept that we had developing Eons, is that you can spend Lux, and anybody can spend Lux on rewards. They can get ships out, they can buy cards. And the rate is set by the offense. So the offense can say, you know what, I'm going to set it for 3. And if they do, then they're the only ones that can do it. So they're paying for the privilege of being the only one that encounter who can spend Lux on rewards. They can then say instead, they could open up to one other player, and if they agree, then they share that privilege, and it's two. Or they can say, you know what, it's a free for all. It's 1 lux per reward. Anybody can do it. So I called it the 3-2-1. It's 3 for 1, 2 for 2, and 1 for all. It seemed to be easy enough to remember. And of course, the market card had that information right there. So it's a reference that everybody has. It's very simple and easy to grasp and execute. But we wanted to have the extra thrills and frills. So on the other side of those cards, you have unique effects. And there are 24 different Lux cards in 3 categories. So one category is specifically for the Ultra Lux. So those are called Ultra Lux cards. They give you a unique way to use the Ultra Lux. And the way you get these is anytime you would add exactly 3 Lux to either the hyperspace gate or being pushed into the system, instead of getting 3 single Lux counters, you use 1 Ultra Lux. That's the only way that you can get that, other than like trading somebody. So you can openly trade and say, I'll give you 2 Lux for your Ultra Lux, or I'll give you 4 Lux. That might be a better deal. I'll give you 4 Lux for the Ultra Lux because I have a unique way of using the Ultra Lux. So I like that element in there. But one of those cards, so 8 of those cards, give you unique ways you can use those. Another one, it started off as this idea of a shared thing that you can do, but Frank Brooks turned it up to 11 with a better idea. So it's this way, it's a unique way that you can spend Lux for some effect. So there's 8 of those cards. But somebody else can do it too. They're just paying you for that privilege. So it was kind of an interesting take on it. And then the other one has unique ways that you're earning Lux as well. So you may be taxing other people or getting something when you do X, Y, or Z. So, and those were the economic ones. They were supposed to have a little old school Lux symbol in the corner, but they just kept it simple. They're like, they all have that, and let's keep it simple, which fair enough. So that's what Lux is. I'm very happy with how it turned out. Obviously, I'm happy with it. And we're going to be doing a Lux Cosmic Encounter Invitational this month, which we will stream live, and then it will be hopefully a copy of it on this channel as well that you can watch. You can see Lux in action. But yeah, I really like the idea of in the games where you're doing it, you've got that ability to get the rewards, which is fun, but then you also have the unique effects. And the way it works is everyone, the typical rules, everyone is dealt 2. So you have 2 options for which unique effect that you want. You choose that one, and the other one you're going to turn face down so that you've got the Lux market as a reference. So you always have that. That's a constant. The offense is always going to set the rate of what it costs to buy rewards with your Lux. And then everyone has a unique ability that lets them gain or use Lux in a special way. So I think it's the best of both worlds. I think it is an interesting variant. It's probably a little more sophisticated than technology or rewards, maybe space stations, but if so, only barely. It's pretty easy to grasp. And like I said, if you're only using one variant, it's going to be super easy to get into it. If you understand Cosmic Encounter, the Lux is very easy to figure out, and you can probably pile on 1 or 2 other things like the reward deck. That seems like a no-brainer. Add that in there too. Certain other things, it just depends on your group, what your play style is, what you can handle, how you want to be challenged. But there you have it. That is the road from Lucre to Lux. I always loved that word Lucre. Filthy Lucre seemed very Cosmic Encounter to me, but I like Lux too, and so I'm fine with that. I think it works, and I think it satisfies Peter's criteria of trying to unshackle Cosmic Encounter from the bad blood of Lucre, and it lets people who really did like Lucre still have that element in there. And of course, they can just use the counters and play with their old Lucre rules if they want. But I think there's enough in there with what Lux does that it should satisfy just about everybody, give or take. So there you have it. Let me know in the comments If you were a longtime Lucre fan, if you were a Lucre hater, if you did hate Lucre, how do you feel about Lux? Do you still just hate it? And that's fine. It's not for everybody, but I think it's for most players. I think we'll get out of it. Like I said, it creates interesting and unique and fun and surprising situations that might not otherwise happen. And Cosmic Encounter, at its heart, really is about those kinds of experiences, and the unpredictable nature of what can happen and what you hope will happen. That's it for this video, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.